Hi, Not From Boston fans. Today may be game one of the World Series, but the Red Sox are already a few weeks into their offseason. Alex Bregman has already announced that he's opting out of his contract, and the rumor mill has been energizing fans with chatter about players like Kyle Schwarber, Pete Alonso, Hunter Green, and even Tariq Skubal. To get a grip on what lies ahead for the Sox before the offseason kicks off in earnest, Harry and I sat down with Chris Cotillo. Chris covers the Boston Red Sox for Mass Live and co-hosts their podcast, The Fenway Rundown. I met Chris through Twitter, of all places, back in the summer of 2024. I did one of his sports writing workshops, and we had a great conversation about the Red Sox and navigating an ever-evolving sports media landscape. When Harry and I started Not From Boston, I knew I wanted Chris on as a guest. It took a while for our calendars to sync up, but honestly, the timing is perfect. Chris is exactly who we want to talk to as the Red Sox enter another pivotal offseason. As always, be sure to like and subscribe to Not From Boston on Substack or wherever you get your podcasts. And please don't forget to leave us a comment or review. We're also on Instagram at NotFromBostonPod. Your engagement is crucial to help us grow the show, and it means a lot to us to have your support. And now, here's our conversation with Chris Cotillo. Chris, welcome to Not From Boston.
Happy to be here, man. Good to see you.
To see you too. Yeah, I feel like we've been emailing each other back and forth for a while, and it's good that we got this to happen, and I think now's a great time for it with the off season. I mean, our off season started, but kind of before things really kick off, a nice chance to kind of get a sense of what the landscape looks like.
Yep.
So I think first I want to just kick off by talking actually about the front office, because that was a storyline I kind of caught me by surprise with Paul Taboni heading to Washington, and I guess also heading with him was Devin Pearson and Andrew Wright, all guys from the Red Sox front office. Uh, I'm curious, is finding a GM or a second in command still a priority for Breslow, and are these departures from the front office a signal of something larger in terms of a philosophical shift?
I mean, on the second question, no, those guys got massive pay raises to go elsewhere. So pretty simple. I think when you're in Paul Taboni's chair as an assistant GM, you get offered the chance to run the show. You're going to take that every time. Devin Pearson was a scouting director, going around the country, identifying high school and college talent, and then putting together the draft board. And now he gets to have a assistant GM job with the Nationals and work with the major league team. Obviously, a lot more money there. And Wright, was a guy kind of in Fort Myers and hanging out and kind of doing some more. It's more of a kind of a coaching role, not a huge role there. And he's a guy that clearly, was on Taboni's list too. So, I think Taboni's a big one. Pearson, I think they looked at as a potential rising star in the front office. Those two guys played together at Cal, and have kind of followed similar career paths, so they're kind of eternally linked. In terms of a GM, I think you only make that GM job available if you want to kind of inflate a title and promote somebody. I think they were doing that so that Taboni would be the GM and they could give him a bump, both in terms of title and pay, and prevent him from going to one of these other teams. Obviously, that didn't work, and he went to Washington, and the rest is history there. So unless they identify somebody as kind of in a similar spot, I think the Rockies have the only opening left, and I'm not sure any other people are involved there, then I don't think it's a huge priority. They do have that kind of built-in insulation of high-level people who've been there for a while, from O'Halloran, Ferreira, Romero, a couple of the newer assistant GMs, and Groupman and Taylor Smith. So he still does have like 5 or 6 people in that inner circle. And so, titles sometimes, it helps with the organization and the flow and the day to day. For somebody like Breslow, I think it's just something he's going to use to his advantage to keep teams from poaching. And, once it didn't happen, I'm not sure. I think it's probably more of a back burner thing right now, but I could be wrong.
Cool.
Harry, you want to take the next one?
Yeah. I'm curious about our standing with the luxury tax. Do you think, I would assume the answer is yes, but do you think the Red Sox are comfortable going over the CBT threshold again? Obviously, we'll talk about Alex Bregman. That's a huge deal. But even if we keep Alex Bregman, that would imply that we go over the luxury tax again. Is that something that ownership is comfortable doing?
I think so. They were this year to get 89 wins. And, obviously, I think that's just a taste of kind of what they want to do in the future, Bregman does come off the books and Story might, and obviously there's no money going to Devers when there was some last year because he was here for
Right.
2.5 months. But there are big bumps, kind of along the way. Crochet's number goes from like 4 million to 26, 27,
Hmm.
28. Anthony's number goes way up. So some of that money and some of that, savings on any of these guys is already, kind of baked in terms of huge jumps, just based on AAV and that type of stuff. So, I think they will, and they do have still some room to improve. Obviously, some room to spend. But the this is their competitive window. They said that in the end of year press conference, all that stuff, and I think it's one of those things that if not now, then when, right? And they kind of disappointed for so long. They waited and waited, and to make these types of moves last year, they were super aggressive. I think more aggressive than people gave them credit for with Bregman and then Crochet thing that happened, and to again, if not now, then when are they going to do it?
Mm.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, I figure it's happening with every team, but the potential of a lockout a year from now is, I'm sure, kind of influencing what they're doing this offseason. I mean, we kind of saw it
Right.
happen back in 2021 to 22. Were you surprised at all when that Alex Cora retained most of the coaching staff going into this offseason? I mean, I know a lot of, Red Sox Twitter is its own kind of crazy thing, and a lot of people there were, up in arms about Kyle Hudson, and
Mm-hmm.
you can play
You
like
mean
armchair.
the best outfield instructor in baseball? That guy?
Yeah, like you can play like
Oh, okay.
armchair expert, and you can Monday morning
Yeah.
quarterback that thing. But were you surprised that the entire staff came back?
No, not really, because I think you got to look at like who would have gone.
Mm.
Like
Mhm.
Bayo took a big step under Bailey, and the pitching staff had a really good year overall. They got super hurt, but Crochet's an ace. They had a lot of guys come forward. Bailey, I think, had a good year overall. Fatsy, I didn't ever think there was a chance he'd be gone. There were too many strikeouts, some of the issues with runners in scoring position, but you can also point to other metrics that make them look like one of the better offenses in baseball. And, some guys have improved greatly under him. You know, um, Flores was in his first year. Hudson is, again, thought of like the best outfield instructor in the game. And look at what Roman Anthony did defensively, and he's the reason behind that. And base running, which the team got a lot better at throughout the year with guys stealing and, you know, Trevor Story doesn't go 30 for 31 on steals without Kyle Hudson. So we
Crazy.
can, fire a guy for not waving in Nate Eaton, or we can keep him for 8 months of good work, So
Hmm.
that's kind of how I look at it. I don't think fans, have that wide, long view on a lot of those things sometimes, but, it's a group that did have a good year in terms of they got, they got out of a roster that was really, really banged up, That's kind of the reality of it. Um, it just they were able to mix and match. They found a way to, get them into the playoffs with everything that happened. I think from a coaching effort, it was a good season. And a lot of stuff is also contractual too, um, where a lot of these guys are on 2-year contracts, and so they're jumping back and forth between um, you know are they under contract for this year? Are they under contract for next year? And some guys like Ben Rosenthal, I think his contract was just up, and they decided to move on. But that's kind of just how it goes nowadays in the coaching ranks, obviously.
Right. I've read some. I guess I don't know how legit these rumors are, but that the idea that Ramon Vasquez could be considered for a managerial job in one of the openings elsewhere in the league. If that were to happen, is there any sense of like how likely that would be, and any sense of who would take over the bench coaching role if Vasquez was out, or is that just like too hypothetical to consider?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's interviewed with the Twins, but he has not gotten bites anywhere else. I know a few of the Eagles have been uh, claimed with the Giants hiring Vitello and the Angels hiring Suzuki, and some of these moves that have happened this week. There's still a lot of openings, and so far the only team that's called on any of the Red Sox coaches is the Twins on Vasquez. Just I would say more likely than not that he stays. But there's this weird kind of question about Jason Varitek and where those things stand mostly. those questions are being posed by his wife on Twitter, when in reality the team expects him to just be back in the same role he's been in. So, not sure where all that's kind of coming from, but um, it's I think status quo is kind of the name of the game when it comes to the staff at large.
Hmm, cool. I definitely, running it back to what I was just asking my first question about, I am very disappointed but not surprised about the Alex Bregman decision. And I just wanted to pick your brain about if you think the Red Sox are likely to retain Alex Bregman, what potentially that might look like. I think Bennett and I have the joint opinion that it's important to, I would say, make a good faith effort to retain Bregman, considering we traded Rafael Devers. I think not that it's hard to necessarily pinpoint that the Rafael Devers movement was entirely because we brought in a better third baseman, but I think the optics look that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I just wanted to pick your brain on that. If you think that's something that'll happen, what a contract could look like, and if not, what are some other options out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think once you're at this point, the incumbent has less of a chance than they had throughout the year when they had exclusive negotiating rights.
Yep.
And in 10 days to 2 weeks, he's going to start taking meetings with teams, and a lot of teams that, especially in terms of American League contenders, are, right on the verge, but maybe need that guy to put them over the top, a proven winner, a corner infielder, a bat, a veteran. I look at Seattle as a team in that mold, right? Suarez is a free agent. He's a guy that could go there and be kind of perfect for what they need. And they just tasted game 7 of the ALCS, and the World Series was right within their grasp. And now maybe it's time to, after doing absolutely nothing in the offseason last year, go out and make a big move. The Tigers wanted him last year. Same thing could apply. The Cubs, same exact thing. The Blue Jays, obviously, their infield super unsettled right now, but, who knows where what the Blue Jays do in an effort. Let's say they lose in the next couple of weeks, and they need a guy to put them over the top. They were linked to him last year. I think there's a lot of teams that are going to be looking at this guy, and I think he is no longer prioritizing like fit, and no longer prioritizing creative deals. He's prioritizing, where am I going to get the most money over the longest span?
Mm-hmm.
And if a team goes to 7 years for him, or a team goes to 7, 8 years for a guy who's 31 and gets silly because they want to have him in their competitive window in 26, 27, and 28 and see what happens after that, then I think the Red Sox are going to be super uncomfortable with that.
Yeah.
And, I think teams are going to be willing to get silly in a way that they weren't last year, because he had the qualifying offer attached. This year he doesn't. The Red Sox are not going to be able to get him for 3 for 120 with opt outs again. It's going to be as long term as of a deal as possible. The years are going to matter. He told me he wants to be in a place where he can call home for the rest of his career. Some guys get 2 bites at the apple. He's doing that. This is his second one. It's probably the final one. And so he wants to secure the biggest deal he possibly can. Um, and, it'll come down to, are the Red Sox willing to be that team? I think there's parts of, the Alex Bregman package that they absolutely love, many parts, most parts of it, but there's also parts of it that say, do we want to be paying this guy when he's 37 or 38? If another team is, that might be the answer to the question.
Right.
And so I think that's a fascinating storyline to watch. People look at it like, well, they'll figure it out. I don't look at it that way. Once a guy's on the open market, once a team can be willing to, get silly, get crazy, get aggressive. We've seen it time and time again. This isn't going to be the same free agency for him where it waits and the Red Sox can have a deal that they like fall into their lap in February. It's going to be a different story, and it's going to be a real bidding war in that way.
Is there a possibility that they are able to make a deal with Bregman before the World Series ends, or before the doors open to all the other teams to consider him? Or is that
I
something
mean,
that
if you're Scott Boras, why would you
right?
not take 29 other suitors, right? Like you're 2 weeks away from that. So
Yeah,
that's why you never see deals get done this time of year.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the A-Rod extension in '07 always kind of has stuck in my brain as
Mm-hmm.
oh well, I guess it's possible, because I remember them interrupting our World Series victory with
Right.
that bullshit news. Um, yeah, I guess so. Sticking with the roster, I mean, I think for years I think Harry and I have shared this opinion. This roster has been crazy congested, and I think in order for us to make actual movement deeper into the postseason, we gotta clear some of that out. Uh, I know I was surprised when Wilyer Abreu wasn't traded last year, and I was kind of surprised that Duran wasn't traded at the deadline. Do you, which player do you see being most likely to move this offseason, or do you see both of them moving?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say Duran one, and then I'd have Rafaela two. I just think that, people don't think about Rafaela as a trade candidate at all when there's really no reason to not have him on the table. The contract is not going to be something that teams shy away from. The defensive floor is high. Maybe a team thinks that they can get through to him in terms of not swinging as much, and they can do that. Um, but I think, Duran is the one. I also like I said about Bregman, people look at it, oh well, they'll figure it out. Like I don't think that there's an 100% guarantee that one of these guys is moved. They could, and they have the chips, and especially they have the password coming behind them as yet another outfielder in the mix. But to me, a team that has way too many outfielders, and that's such a problem. Where's everybody going to get to play? Had Nate Eaton starting in right field in two playoff games. So,
Yeah,
those things, especially in the modern game, especially with pitching, but definitely with both sides of the roster, like you need more than just a starting nine you're going to trot out there every day or a top 12 of position players. You see the attrition throughout the year. So, it's going to be a high bar. Obviously, they can use one of those guys to go get a pitcher or go get a power bat, whatever it is. Um, but I think a lot of times these things are easier on paper than they are in reality, where, they went through most of this season with, too many outfielders. And again, they ended up short when it mattered most. So,
yeah.
um, depth is never a bad thing. And if Alex Cora can have four guys and have one of them be the DH on a given day, if they don't sign someone like Schwarber, I think that's a good option too.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of again, Red Sox Twitter is just hilarious. There's just the most like the craziest ideas. I know I see you on there a lot as well. You must find it entertaining to some
Hmm.
extent.
That's what
I
the mute button's for.
the Kyle Tucker chatter I find hilarious because I'm like, oh yes, what we absolutely need is one more left-handed outfielder who
Right.
all but this one costs $400 million.
Yeah. No, I just talked about that with McAdam on our pod and talked about that feels like some good, Scott Boras tactics. Hey, float the Red Sox out there and we'll see what happens. But
Yeah.
on paper and in reality, I don't think it really works.
Yeah, it's same with the Soto thing last year. It was just kind of,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, I
Well,
guess it'd
that
be
was real.
nice,
That
but
one's real. But I mean,
yeah.
you
But
know,
it would have
like
also, I mean, that would have also screwed up a lot of stuff for our roster anyway.
right. But
Um,
he's a generational guy at a level that
right.
Tucker's I think not. He's great, but he's not at that level. And I think you can make exceptions for Soto that you wouldn't for Tucker,
Mm,
especially
Yeah.
now that you know that Anthony's good. Last year it was a dream. This year it's the reality, right?
mm,
Yeah. Very much looking forward to a full season from him. Fingers
yes.
crossed.
Chris, I'm really curious about Christian Campbell because I think we got the contract off the out of the way early in the season. He came up, had an incredible month and a half, 6, 7 weeks, and then the floor fell below him, and I think that happens to young players. I was a little surprised that he wasn't considered in the mix for the postseason. I guess he hadn't been up. I was surprised they didn't give him a September call up and consider him at least a pinch hitter for the postseason. But I'm just curious what potentially we could be looking at as a long-term future for Christian Campbell. I think similarly to Rafaela, it's a team-friendly contract. Are we looking at potential trade bait? Are we looking at second base as an option? Are we looking at first
Hmm.
base as an option?
Yeah, I mean, I think what they were hoping is, hey, right-handed. We need a right-handed offensive help heading into the
Hmm.
year. Was what it was their thought. We'll have this kid start at second, and if he hits enough and can play representative defense and have the defense get better as the game doesn't speed up on him in the big leagues, then that would be perfect. And so there was some offensive floor, but some defensive projection, in that. And as he started struggling offensively, the defensive struggles there were even worse. I mean, anybody who's watching it on a daily basis, it was really, really tough to watch.
Yeah.
And those things, once he were carrying over between the batter's box and the field. And then when he went to AAA, it was even worse. And the defensive part of it is something that did not improve enough for them to be willing to give him a call up to the point where I think they're looking at it like as an organization we're not sure he's ever going to be able to figure it out at second base or ever be able to figure it out at first base. And so now he's an outfielder. But the question we were just talking about is there's
Yeah.
already not enough room, right? So it's a puzzle in that way where, he's a guy that, you look at as opening day second baseman, but really a left fielder probably moving forward. But do you really want to stick him out there when you have, three or four good ones? It's not an easy situation. And I
Yeah.
think, they decided to be super, super patient with him. Some of the offensive numbers got a little bit better. This is also a guy who has not played that much baseball compared to a lot of players that you see in the role that he is in. He redshirted a year at Georgia Tech. He did not have the full year, the full college experience. He had one basically pro season where he hit the cover off the ball, then got promoted. And this year, he said he's looking at as like another redshirt year. So, the good news is there's plenty of time to figure it out. 7, 8 years to figure it out with him. Um, is the book closed on him? No, I think it's just the positional question is such a big one because, you're not going to have him, penciled in at second base anymore because the
Yeah.
defense is just not there. At the same time, where you want to play him, it doesn't make a lot of sense because you have too many guys. So, a fascinating guy, not a forgotten one in the organization, but when you look at how the puzzle fits together, not a guy that's top of mind either.
Speaking of puzzle pieces and like where guys fit, I gotta talk about first base. Um, I guess with you have Nathaniel Lowe, who uh was kind of a last minute pickup. Romy Gonzalez has been great and very versatile for us. And then of course Tristan Casas. I don't know what his recovery timeline is exactly,
Mm-hmm.
but I think they're aiming for spring training. I don't know if
Yep.
that's
Yep.
so I guess yeah, I don't even know if there's a question there. I'm just kind of like first base itself is a question mark to me.
Yeah. Well, I think Lowe gets cut, here shortly, whether it be just kind of released after the season or non-tendered in
Mm,
November, just because you're not going to pay him $14 million to come back no matter what. That's what you'd have to do in arbitration. You can,
yeah.
non-tender him and re-sign him for 4 million, whatever it is. And that's, maybe a palatable deal as an insurance option. I think that's a spot where they can go out and get aggressive. People look at Pete Alonso, though he's horrible defensively.
Yeah.
I talked about Luis Ariz today, also not great defensively, but
Yeah.
the bat to ball is something that the offense needs. I don't think they're going to try Schwarber at first at this stage, but it's one of the few truly open positions. But also like you have that Casas question mark, and I'm high on him and think that he still has potential at 25, 26 to put it all together. And obviously, Romy's a good platoon player. I think he played too much this year, and he actually played well during it, but you don't want him playing as much as he did this year. So. Um, it could go a variety of different
Yeah.
ways, even Suarez playing first and a big power bat, but it's always this balance of, what does this team need? They need more home runs, but they need fewer strikeouts and they need better defense. Those three things are not going to be found in one player generally.
Yeah.
And so, how do they figure all of that out? Obviously through multiple moves and chess, not checkers, and all that type of stuff. But I don't think they're guaranteeing anything to Casas just because it's been so many injuries the last couple of years. At the same time, he's not forgotten, and he's not really a trade candidate because there's no value there either.
Yeah. With Casas, I feel like I think this feeling is probably going to be true for me in 2026, but coming at the beginning of 2025, my concern for him wasn't, uh, the physical injury from 23 and missing all of that time, but it was clearly like it was the mental game of it. It felt like it seemed at least at the beginning of the year before he got hurt this past season, Casas's head was just like not fully in the game, and he was, and I mean, baseball is a really mental game, and I think he was kind of. It seemed to me like he
Yeah, I
was
think,
taking
if there's
himself
any
out.
issue with that with him, it's being too cerebral and too fine
Yeah,
tuning. I mean, everything is so, to hear him talking about his hitting process is insane. A
yeah.
lot of guys are just kind of simplify. He doesn't. And so sometimes that can work against you.
Is there like a reality where he starts the year in Worcester to get his head right, just to like kind of focus on playing the game and not the stakes of it all of coming back
Yeah, I
from
mean, I think
injury
it's,
again?
as some sort of quasi rehab assignment. Yeah.
Yeah,
Especially if they have insurance, but they don't on the roster is currently
right.
constructed right now.
Yeah,
Hmm. So, Chris, I obviously this free agent class I think is considered I would say underwhelming compared to the last few years, although I do think there's a few names. You've mentioned Pete Alonso, you've mentioned Eugenio Suarez. If we were to take two stabs at a player that you realistically think you could see in a Boston Red Sox uniform, of the highest profile marquee free agents listed, who do you think the Red Sox realistically make a shot at getting?
Schwarber number one. I think he's a perfect
Wow.
fit in a lot of ways, and Dylan Cease, and maybe as a little bit of a
Interesting.
buy low guy, but a guy they've liked for a long time, and I think is a perfect number two.
Wow. Schwarber's so interesting because I think again, it's a joint opinion that I think a lot of Boston fans have that he should have been brought back in the first place. I
Hmm.
think he
Yeah.
was a really, really good fit for the team. And that's something that you mention it, but that's not something that you think would be a first base experiment. You think that would be purely a designated hitter.
No, I mean I think I could play better at first at this
Yeah.
stage with him. So
So then my
Yeah.
follow-up question would be, where does that leave us with Masataka Yoshida? Because that's another like,
yeah, I
you
mean
know,
I just think it's time to cut bait in some fashion. It's just whether you take on a lot of salary in a trade or outright DFA him or whatever it is. It's just he's clogging up the roster in some ways. How do you do
Yeah.
that? Keep every outfielder and have one guy DH if he's on the team. They literally had to bury him in Fort Myers when
yep,
before trading Devers, right? People forget about that now. So
That was so
um,
strange.
they got to find something, but it's not. I just don't think the future's here.
yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Just moving briefly to the mound, and I kind of agree with Dylan Cease. I'm kind of interested in obviously I would love to trade for Joe Ryan, or sign Michael King, but we'll see. I looking at it in kind of prep for this, I didn't really realize how much deeper our number of like starters had gotten in comparison to like entering or even like in 2024 compared
Right.
to now.
Hmm.
And we had a lot of injuries, but next year we'll have Dobbins will hopefully be back at some point. Cutter Crawford will. I think Hauk is. I think probably still going to miss most of, if not
Yep.
all, of next year. Patrick Sandoval. Uh, and then we already have like Tolley, Early, Fitz, and like where do these guys all go?
Right.
I mean, I imagine some will have to go to Worcester. Cooper Criswell's out of options, I think. So he'd have to, be at the major league level. Do some of these guys become bullpen arms?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of them are traded. I think
Yeah.
starting a package with Early or Tolley or Dobbins or, to a lesser degree, Harrison or Fitz, like to me, those guys are, clear trade bait because you have that insulation. People now complain about the Priester trade. No one complained about it that day. If you don't complain about it
Yeah.
that day, you're not allowed to complain in the future.
Yeah.
That's my rule. But
That was a good trade. That was
yeah, and so they have guys like in that mode who I think you could dangle for. Minnesota wants one of those guys back for Joe Ryan. That's could headline the package. Or whoever it is. So to me, that's one avenue, and I do think you need like 12 guys to get through a major league season. Now we saw that this year when you have Connolly Early starting Game 3 of a playoff series, and Dustin May got hurt and Fitz, and obviously they released Bueller and all that stuff. So
I forgot about Bueller.
they have to they have to have built-in insulation. To me, when you look at the rotations, I think you can get a fourth and a fifth starter out of that group you talked about. You have Crochet as your one, Bayo as your three, and the question mark is adding a number two.
Hmm.
And I think you can figure it out with those eight guys to get a four and a five and have different guys take those roles. This season started with, Richard Fitz at four and Sean Newcomb at five, and it's changed 50 different times throughout. That's what happens now.
Yeah.
Um, Hauk and Bueller basically gave you nothing, and you still made the playoffs, right? Because you had different guys step up at different times. So that's just kind of the modern game. I don't think they need to go out and add like two or three starters. I think they have the built-in insulation. The other thing I'd say there is, people have very quickly forgotten about Cutter Crawford. He led the team in innings 2 years ago.
Hmm.
He's a very, very, very good number five if he's in that spot for you. I think he's better than that. And Patrick Sandoval is a guy who had a really good career with the Angels, and you're paying nearly $10 million. So another guy
Yeah.
not to be forgotten about too.
Mhm.
Yeah. I really like Connolly Early. I think, what happened in Game 3 was not his fault,
Nope.
really. I would really love to see him stay, but I also understand like he's a very valuable trade piece.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, right now, if you're projecting the rotation, he's your number three, based on who's on the roster.
Yeah.
But does he have the highest ceiling on that group? I'd say Tolley probably has a higher ceiling, and Dobbins is a guy I really like too. So there's a
Hmm.
lot of there's
Yeah.
just they got to the task is now identifying who to keep and who to move, and that'll kind of dictate the future of the franchise for 5 years. No pressure.
Yeah. As far as relief pitching goes, I think that's something that gets often swept under the rug. Are we looking at most likely is kind of a piggyback to what Bennett just asked, but building out the middle and back end? I know we obviously have Chapman again, which is incredible. What an amazing season he had. Do you see the Red Sox making a splash for like a big free agent reliever? I don't really know who's available on the market as a relief pitcher. I feel like it's never really discussed. Is that something you see, or is it more likely we take, the myriad pitchers we already have and convert some into relief pitching?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just an area where they don't need to spend huge because you have Chapman already locked in. I mean,
Hmm.
their free agent shopping started in late August, early September when they
Right.
extended Chapman for a year and 13.3 million. Um, and you already have Whitlock kind of coming back for sure, and you're going to keep him in that eighth inning role. Slayton, a guy that did not have a great year, obviously was injured for a lot of it, but who could be, a wipeout guy. Weissert and Kelly are back. Bernardino and Murphy both had pretty good seasons are back. I think for them, it's just adding those veteran depth guys. What I'd do would be one lefty, one righty. A guy like Steven Matz makes a lot of sense. Middle
Yeah.
relievers, 2, 3, 4 million on a 1 year deal. The Justin Wilson deal a year ago is the perfect example. And maybe a guy like Luke Weaver is a guy who's a free agent. There's obviously bigger names: Edwin Diaz, Ryan Helsley, Robert Suarez. Some of these guys. I just don't think it's a good use of resources for a team that had the best 8-9 combo in the league for the last few months of the year. They have the second best bullpen ERA in baseball, which I think is surprising, probably to many. Um, to me, I would just not mess with the back end, but also add some depth and also assume, like you said, that maybe Richard Fitz is a really good seventh inning man.
Mhm.
Maybe Peyton Tolley down the stretch again is relied on as a wipeout 2 inning reliever. They're going to try to have him start obviously to begin the year, but um, they have. I think they're going to want to keep everybody stretched out and adding depth. A couple of guys on 1 year for 4 million, 1 year for 5 million. I think would go a
Hmm.
long way.
Cool.
Yeah. I think just kind of moving off of the 2026 Sox and just I think having some fun with it. I I really loved that I mean getting beat by the Yankees sucks, and I don't remember the last time I hated that team this much.
Hmm.
But I love that I felt that way. Like I do you feel that this rivalry now that both I mean the Yankees I feel like always act like a window's open now that our window is open. Do you feel like having played each other in the postseason again, there's a chance for this rivalry to kind of reignite?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just there's a few different things that make it not really. I mean, they don't play each other as much, 12 games instead of 19 during the regular season, and players, and I think one thing that plays into this in a huge way is that it's not a bad thing. I mean, it's not, it just is what it is, but the managers are very close friends. Like, you can't
Yeah.
have the true hate when you have that as the backdrop. So I think that's going to be the case as long as those guys are both there. Um, so that's part of it. I mean, the rivalry is the rivalry, right? I was at Yankee Stadium for all three of those games. I was there in late August. Place is packed. Fenway's crazy for Yankee series. It's always huge. It's always national TV. I mean, reignite means punches are thrown, right? I don't think that's going to happen until Boone and Cora are not there.
Yeah, maybe I've been rewatching the comeback a little too much.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like
Hard not to do. It's so
two
good.
competitive teams, and I think you look at it and the division. I think Hebron, the answer is just incredibly hard. You have the Blue
Mhm.
Jays in the World Series. The Rays always, I always say they could take the three of us and six other platoon guys and find a way to win a game.
Yeah.
And then the Orioles, you got to figure that they're going to be, bouncing back. They still have that young core and a ton of talent. So
Mhm.
it's a tough division for years to come. And you see, I mean, just I think now the goalposts have moved for the Red Sox, where we just saw the value of getting in, right? And like
Yeah.
you now see the value over, well, Red Sox fans experience the first week of this month in getting home field. You also
Yeah.
see the value of getting the first round bye, where it happens quick and everything's so, you know, tight in those 3 days or 2 or 3 days, whatever it is. You want to avoid, being the wild card road team. It's just going into that game 3. I don't know how you guys felt being there, Ubering to the stadium in the Bronx. It's like this is the last day of the Red Sox season.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
it just is, and that's
Yeah.
just. I mean, I would have been shocked if they won that game. If it was at Fenway, would I have felt different? That's what determines a season, right? It's not the
Mhm.
7 months before it. So
Yeah.
I think that should push them to, and it's going to be hard because, like I said, the whole division should probably be pretty good.
Yeah. To that note, it's funny. Bennett and I talk about this a lot in our episodes, but I find it very strange when it's not just fans, but teams. I I don't want to say they undervalue, but they don't seem to put emphasis on the beginning of the season, winning. We look back at the Chicago White Sox series. I think we split 2 out of 4.
Hmm.
Um, Games like that, if we win one or, if we end up sweeping that series, we could be looking at a completely different thing. I know ultimately the Yankees ended up taking that first wild card by a few more games, but I find it interesting that it always seems to come down to September when teams suddenly seem to really turn on the Jets.
Right.
Now, I have a pivot question. This is we talked about Twitterverse and people have
Mhm.
ridiculous takes, but I did see this last night knowing this interview was coming out, and I was just curious your thoughts. Shohei Ohtani struck out 10 batters and hit 3 home runs.
Hmm.
One of the most, probably the most incredible performance we will ever see in the sport of baseball. We've seen players make attempts, Joey Gallo, to make the pivot to pitching. I remember Alex Verdugo making a comment that
Yep.
he could be a two-way player. Do you think there is a realistic possibility that we see more legitimate two-way players in baseball over the next decade? And will any of them be actually effective on both sides of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of players want to do it, especially coming out of high school or coming out of college.
Hmm.
But it's just, I mean, Tolley was a pretty good hitter and a first
Yeah.
baseman 2 years ago at Wichita. So, but teams are trying to maximize what they can get out of these guys. And if Peyton Tolley's throwing 100 from the left side, and you want to have him be in the pitching lab and be working on his secondary stuff and looking at biometrics and all that stuff, because he could be an ace, him taking BP is a waste of time. And I
Yeah.
think that's just what it comes down to for all these guys. Hunter Green was a huge two-way player 10 years ago when he came out, or less than that. I don't think he's taken in a bat in the big leagues, right? Or maybe, probably not. So I just think it comes down to time. The thing about Ohtani that's, you know, so ridiculous is just the routine of having to prepare, as a hitter and prepare as a pitcher. That's a full day on either side. And I think,
Hmm.
you have a kid at, single A, double A. The Red Sox have one in Conrad Kaysen, right, who they were trying, and I think ended up getting hurt this year in some
Yeah.
form. Yeah, he's only played, 2 total games. Like, it just ends up being too much in the minor leagues, and it takes a real, you know, um, it takes a real unicorn, and we're seeing that with Ohtani.
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
Chris, last question before we let you go, and we really appreciate your time
Yeah.
here.
Of
Thank
course.
you so much.
Uh, Shit, I just forgot the question. No, hang on, I got it. What I guess what has to happen for you to consider this offseason a good offseason?
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, the roster has to be better, um, and I think that's very subjective. But you do it in this way, you know, it can't be, you lose Giolito and have somebody else slide in at Giolito's level. It can't be you lose Bregman and have somebody else slide in at Bregman's level.
Mhm.
It's you replace the guys you're losing and add more to it. And so to me, going out and getting one of those number 2 types, whether it be Ryan or Green or Gore or, Cease, King, you name it, somebody who's better than Bayo. That's the standard. And then, 2 bats if you lose Bregman, 1 big bat if you keep him. And I think that's, this team, for a team that won 89 games and was resilient and probably punched up a little bit based on the talent level and especially the attrition late, they deserve all the credit in the world. You look at, there are, big flaws, and they didn't hit enough home runs. They struck out too much. The infield defense, again, there's no perfect player that can solve all those things. There's probably a combination out there. And I think, that's kind of the standard to me. And I think it starts with that, tone setting number 2 starter that pitches game 2 of a playoff series for you. But the lineup's a big piece of it too.
Yeah.
Cool.
Great.
I've got one more for Chris.
Okay, yeah,
Very
go for it.
quick.
Go for it.
Give me your World Series prediction.
Dodgers in 6, and it's not bad
Really?
for baseball. Every team should be doing what they're doing.
That's kind of where I'm at. I'm like,
I
it's
agree.
it's
I agree.
either like Dodgers in 6 or Blue Jays in 5. I somehow I think the Blue Jays would do it quicker. I don't know why that's my gut
And I
telling me
agree
that,
with
but
you. I don't think the
Sportsbook, go
Dodgers are
find it.
bad for baseball.
yeah, I think this will be actually a pretty interesting World Series.
Yeah, I mean, you root for, in my job, you root for, just weird things like that, whatever is going to make your life easier or happier in the course of a day. So, like when the Red Sox were that game 162, we didn't know we were going the next day. I was hoping that we'd end up in Toronto over that. Like, that's what I was rooting for, because I thought it'd be such a cool environment to see playoff baseball up there. I'd rather have done that than
It looks
New York.
fantastic.
I don't care if the Red Sox win or lose those games, but I just cared about where we were going, and so I'm happy for Toronto, because place is going to be absolutely rocking the next few days.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see that. I'm very excited for. I mean, I just want Vladdy to. I don't know why I care so much about Vladdy, but I do.
Well, the Red Sox aren't signing him. Sorry to burst
I
the
know.
bubble.
Yeah. We hoped at one point.
Yeah. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks, man.
Thanks,
It's
guys.
been
Always a pleasure.
Yeah. And we'll talk to you later.
Sounds good. Enjoy the offseason.
You too.
Take care, man.